Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make this super adorable and cute and actually surprisingly very easy Labubu cake. Now I know that the obsession with Labubus is like crazy, and even though I don't understand this, I had to make a cake for a little client that wanted a black Labubu cake and it turned out so good. So I decided to make a video showing you how to do it because I was surprised how easy it was. For this tutorial, we're going to be using whipped cream frosting because I know a lot of people have questions on how to do decorations using the whipped cream frosting because I, like a lot of you guys, do not like buttercream. It just doesn't taste good, and I always opt to use whipped cream in most of my cakes. Here's everything that you'll need for the cake. First of all, the filling. We're not going to be using whipped cream to fill the cakes. This is very important. You want a fudge frosting or a ganache that sets and becomes hard in the refrigerator. If you use whipped cream in between your cake layers, it will cause the cake to slide, and we don't want that because we will be flipping the entire cake. Next, you're going to need an offset spatula. You can use a large one or a small one like this, it doesn't really matter. If you don't have an offset spatula, a butter knife will work as well. Next, you'll need the whipped cream frosting along with some food coloring. You can use any colors you'd like, but do not use liquid food coloring. Gel food coloring is the best, especially when working with whipped cream because it will not make your cream runny. Next, you'll need a piping bag and one piping tip, which is the grass nozzle. Next, you'll need 3 thick straws. This is straws that is usually used for drinks. This is going to make our cake sturdy. You'll also need a serrated knife, or a regular knife works as well, and then fondant, of course, and your cake layers along with 2 cake boards and a turntable. To start, place your cake board on your turntable, and since these cake boards that I had were very flimsy, I decided to use a tray underneath. So I took this round tray that I had, I flipped it over, and then placed my cake board on top. This way I can easily pick up the cake from the turntable to put it into the refrigerator. The first thing that we're going to do is place the first cake layer and then add the first layer of chocolate ganache or your chocolate fudge frosting. This is my chocolate fudge frosting that I use for my Matilda chocolate cake. I will leave the recipe in the description box below. Spread that out evenly, and then you're going to add your second cake layer. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is before you add the first cake layer, you do want to add a dollop of the frosting underneath just so that the cake doesn't slide around on the board. Add on the last cake layer facing upside down so that you have a flat surface on top, and then what we're going to do is put this into the refrigerator while we color the whipped cream frosting. This is the Labubu that I'm going for. It's called Lychee Berry and it's this nude pink color. I started off with some pink food coloring and then gave that a good mix, and then to that I added some purple food coloring just to tone the pink down a little bit, and I also added some cocoa powder off camera to achieve this color. The color is actually quite light on camera. In real life, this was much darker. At this point, the cake has been in the refrigerator for around 5 minutes and the fudge frosting inside has set. So what we're going to do is use a ruler to cut less than 1/4 of the cake off like I'm doing so here. I use a ruler because I'm terrible at making straight lines, but you could definitely eyeball this. You don't want to cut off too much of the cake as well. We're going to do just a little bit less than 1/4 of the cake. You can save that piece for yourself because you deserve it. And now what we're going to do is use a pastry brush just to clean up all of the little crumbs on the cake board. Now add your colored whipped cream frosting, and this is going to be the crumb coat. We're going to cover the entire cake with just enough frosting to hold the crumbs in. We're not looking to cover the entire cake up. This is just a layer that's going to help hold in all the crumbs. Sorry for my voice, I am a little bit sick while I'm doing this voiceover, so excuse me for that. What I did now was I cut a piece of parchment paper that is the shape of the face of the Labubu, and then I used that flat top part of the cake just to make sure that the size is correct. That flat top part is going to be the front of the cake, so you do want to keep that in mind when you're cutting this piece of parchment paper out. Then I drew the features on top of the parchment paper, and what we're going to do is use this as a guide to make the pieces out of fondant. First, let's start with the face. So I'm going to be using pre-colored fondant because it's so much easier, especially when it comes to the skin color and the black, but you could definitely color your own fondant. As you can see, fondant that comes straight from the container is super hard. You're going to knead this with your hands until it's soft and pliable like this. and then use powdered sugar or cornstarch to help roll this out into a thin sheet. You want the thickness to be about quarter of an inch. You don't want to do it too thick because since this is whipped cream, the fondant easily falls off. Next, what I'm going to do is place the face that we made on top and use it as a stencil to cut out the shape of the face. Use your fingers to soften up the edges just so that you have a nice clean look, and then we're going to make the rest of the components. Again, start off by kneading your dough and then you're going to roll it out, and this is for the eyes. I'm using the drawing as a guide to make the correct shape for the eyes, then I'm going to use a knife to cut it out. Soften the edges using your fingers and then use this piece as a stencil to cut out another piece in the same shape. Then I did the same thing for the teeth. I used the drawing as a stencil and cut out a bunch of tiny triangles. Working with fondant might seem intimidating, but it's actually really fun when you start doing it. You just have to go with the flow and keep creating. And it's okay if you mess up because you can just mix it up and try again. Now I did the same thing for the eyebrow part, which is skin color. After you cut it out, remember to smoothen it out using your fingers just so it looks nice and clean. Now for the ears, it's important to keep the fondant thicker because you need it to be thick enough for a toothpick or a skewer to poke through it. This is going to help it stand on top of the cake. I just eyeballed the shape, but you can make a stencil for it too if that's easier for you. After making one ear, use that as a guide to make another identical ear, soften up the edges after cutting it out, and your ears are ready to go. The inner part of the ear does have the same color as the fur, so what I'm going to be doing is coloring some white fondant the same color as the frosting. Well, at least as close as I can get it to. As you can see, coloring fondant is very messy, which is why I like to use pre-colored fondant as much as I can. Again, as with the frosting, the fondant looks very light on camera, but in real life, it was a much darker color. I rolled that out into a very thin sheet and then used the ear as a guide to measure the width. And then I'm just going to go up and eyeball it and make it shorter than the actual width because we don't want it to cover the entire ear. We want to be able to see that skin color from the sides and the top. Now, I also made this cute little heart nose. I know the actual nose is like a circle and a Labubu, but I thought this heart would be super cute because I saw it on Pinterest and I thought that that would look adorable. So I made a heart ear, but you can definitely make it round if you'd like. Then I made the black part of the eyes doing the same method by using the drawing as a guide. And for the smile, what you're going to do is take a piece of black fondant and roll it out into a log. If it gets too long, you could cut it again. Keep rolling it until you get a very thin black log. Then what I did is use the drawing as a guide again to place it on top and then cut it as long as I need it. All of our components are ready, and as you can see, I also made this very cute and adorable flower. Next, what we're going to do is put all of these pieces together. As you can see here, I'm making the blush part of the Labubu, which is very adorable and cute, but I learned the hard way that you should probably do this step at the very end after placing the face on the Labubu, because I use powder food coloring for this, and over time what happened was that the powder food coloring became wet because of the moisture of the fondant and just spread everywhere. So I did have to redo this face like 2 or 3 times and got like food coloring everywhere. So do keep that in mind. Add on the blush after everything is complete, right before you serve the cake. To stick the pieces onto the face, use water and a small paintbrush, and be very careful that not to add too much water, otherwise the fondant will become sticky. Poke small skewers or toothpicks into the ears, making sure not to pierce through the other side, and you're also going to use water to stick on the inner part of the ear. The fondant decorations do need to dry for around 24 hours or longer depending on the humidity. So what I did was on day 1, I made the fondant decorations, I stacked and crumb coated the cake, and on the next day, I finished everything. So next what we're going to do is move on to the cake. The cake is back from the refrigerator for the few last steps that I mentioned. What we're going to do is take the straws and put them into the cake. You're going to start with one straw to check the height and then cut all 3 of them in the same height. This is going to make the cake super sturdy because we are going to be flipping the cake over and we don't want the layers to separate from each other and fall down flat. Trust me, I have done this before without the straws and I kind of did make it a big mess where I had to redo the entire cake and it was not fun. After adding in the straws, use some frosting to cover up the holes. And then what we're going to do is a super neat technique, which is going to make it so much easier for us to flip the cake tomorrow. And that is to add on some plastic wrap in the front and back of the cake. Since this is whipped cream, it's not going to harden in the refrigerator. So adding this plastic wrap is going to make it really easy for us to just pick up the cake and flip it over tomorrow. Be very gentle when you're adding the plastic wrap though, because this is still whipped cream and it's soft, so you don't want to mush it into the cake. We're going to chill this overnight and I will see you tomorrow to put this all together. It's the next day and the cake is nice and chilled. To flip this over, you're going to do the exact steps that I'm going to do in the video here. It's kind of hard to explain. Carefully peel off the first cake board, and then what you're going to do is peel off the plastic wrap on the flat part of the cake like this. And then take your cake board, your new clean cake board, and turn it upside down on top of the cake like this. Don't make your cake upside down. You're going to make the cake board upside down first, and then flip both of them together like this. Peel off the plastic wrap carefully, and there you have it. The cake is ready to be frosted and decorated. The first thing that we're going to do is cover the back of the cake with some crumb coat. This does not have to be perfect because it's all going to be covered anyways. Then what we're going to do is stick on the face on the other side. Keep in mind, this is not the flat back side that you just added the frosting to. You're going to take some melted chocolate and add that on top just where your face is going to go. This is going to act as a glue and create a barrier between the whipped cream and fondant. Since whipped cream is wet, it's going to make the fondant soggy and it's going to slip off. So adding this melted chocolate is a really neat technique to form a glue. After you add the melted chocolate, let it cool for around a minute, and once it gets sticky, you're going to place the fondant face on and push it back gently. Then I added 3 toothpicks like this, making sure not to push them all the way in. This is just an extra measure just in case the face does start drooping off. These toothpicks will hold it up. Then what you're going to do is add all of your frosting into the piping bag with the grass tip and start piping, because we got to cover this entire cake with the fur. Continue this process until you've covered the entire cake, and then we're going to add on the ears. You can just eyeball it to make sure that they look right. I had to pick that one up and put it in again because it was a little bit too far. But the last step to make this really look super cool is to add on the fur on the ears as well. This makes the cake so much more adorable, so don't forget this step. It's a little bit difficult trying to pipe on the sides, but don't worry, you won't be able to see that many imperfections because it's just a bunch of fur anyways. Then I added on the cute little adorable flower, which is optional, and that's it. The cake is ready to go. It's cute, it's fun, it's adorable, and it's surprisingly very, very simple to do. And that was me showing you the mess that the powder food coloring blush created. If I had some luster dust or some shimmer dust, I think I would have used that, and it would have been a way better option than using powdered food coloring. So if you have that on hand, definitely do use that for the blush. Otherwise, you should add the blush using powdered food coloring in the very, very end, like right before serving. When you cut into this cake, the layers do look a little bit funny because the cake is flipped over, but it's super cool. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a comment down below if you found this helpful or if there's anything else you'd like to see or even where you're watching from. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.